It is June 14th, and it is summer. I am in Austin, Texas, and it's starting to melt. We have a great guest today. I am wearing my NFL colors, so watch out. But before we get started, here's our own John Sibley Butler.
Busted flat in Baton Rouge, headed for the train, feeling about as faded as my jeans. Bobby stormed the diesel down right before it rained, took us all the way to New Orleans. I grabbed my harpoon from my dirty red bandana. I was blowing sad while Bobby sang the blues. Them windshield wipers slapping time and Bobby slapping hands in mine. We sang all the songs that drive a kid. Freedom just another word for nothing we got to lose. Nothing don't mean nothing but it's free. Feeling good was always good when Bobby sang the blues. Feeling good was always good for me. Me and Bobby McGee.
Awesome. Fantastic.
All right,
awesome,
John.
awesome.
How's that for a little other guy?
John Butler, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. As you noted, it's getting hot in Austin. And so people are being aware of two things, the heat and the vulnerability of the grid. So all the news, as you know, is about, we can always come back to this, whether it's heat or cold, will the grid hold up? And all the stresses that will be on the grid. Mm-hmm. So that is all of the news, given our experiences about 2 years ago. And the other thing, of course, is the war is still going in Ukraine, in Europe. And I don't think anybody has any answers to it. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what Putin is going to do. But certainly we know that it might have an effect on our economy. The economy seems to be doing well. I know in my space, there's a little cutback on the venture investment, private equity, mostly due to the whole idea of interest rates and those kind of things. But otherwise, everything is going good, doing a lot of writing, looking at cities, trying to improve cities themselves. And, the stock market is hanging in there. So we had a real interesting time, I think, in America. And remember, I think that lots of times in America have been interesting. But war always puts another variable in the equation. Absolutely. You can have the ups and the downs of economies, but war holds another kind of distinctive formula for the impact on supply chains, the impact of the movement of people, and the movement of people across time and space from different countries to other countries. So we're an interesting time, but I think we can solve it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of the interesting times that we're in, and also reminded that, there's a big saying in Texas that if you don't like the weather or if you don't like what's going on, just wait a few minutes, everything will change. So we live in a very, very fast-paced reality that, between Meta and, and I also, I was very excited about the announcement from Apple of Vision Pro. I don't know if you all keep track of what's going on with that, but it's a new computing operating system where you don't need to use your keyboard and your mouse anymore, and you wear your computer in your eyes, and you can use your fingers, and the screen is the entire vision that you have. It's an amazing way of things are going to evolve. And it's interesting how, we are shifting from a lot of analog to a lot of digitalization as we talk more and more about that, and decentralization and decarbonization. I'm excited about our new guest for today. So Chris Guttman-McCabe, how are you, sir?
I'm doing really well. I want to say I've done hundreds of these, Andres. I've never had a walk-up song before. The John playing Bobby McGee, it warmed my soul. Like, it is one of my favorite songs, and that was a spectacular rendition. So, John, kudos. At the same time, Andres, you couldn't have put on a worse shirt for your guest today. And yes, I'm speaking of myself in the third person. Dallas Cowboys. I'm an Eagles guy. So you're
I know,
killing me.
I know, I
Yeah.
know, but it's awesome because you're an Eagles guy, and I have to remind you of something. You know, there's all these affiliations in life. So your first Super Bowl was won by a Westlake guy that
Love
that
it.
I happen to have helped coach and grow up.
Oh, I love that. Love that. Love that. Yeah, there are
So
connections.
in that game, I was really, really, really rooting for the Eagles.
Okay, good. I'll take that. I'll take that. I like that. And I have to say, I did talk about the grid and Texas. I did just leave Austin, and it's 105-degree weather, and I'm in Brighton, Colorado, where it's 65. So
Right.
I at this moment, I'll take Brighton over Austin.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, much nicer, no doubt. Now, you know, for those of you that don't know, Chris is actually the executive that runs Anterix's government relations strategy, and he has been an industry guy for a long time, and we're very excited about to get in with him for the next hour or so. I'm also reminded that we discuss so many topics here, and actually what Anterix enables, it's beyond what they say they enable, in my opinion, because we talk about telecommunications, we talk about Internet of Things, we talk about smart cities and smart energy, and we talk about electrification of transportation, we talk about smart buildings, and all these things require connectivity. And so it is really interesting to really get deep into what we're going to talk about with a country that has more than 3,000 utilities, and you got all these co-op organizations and public power and the investor owned with EEI and all that, shifting and trying to keep up with what's happening, and the genie's sort of out of the bottle. And so, Chris, tell us a little bit about your role in Anterix, and then we dive into all kinds of questions.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Andre. So I'll start with Anterix, a little bit background. Wireless broadband company, founded by the founders of Nextel. They saw a need for broadband in the utility sector. We acquired a tranche of spectrum. We took it to the FCC. We turned it from narrowband into broadband, and we began offering a broadband product to the utility sector. We have 5 large utility customers. We have Ameren and Evergy. We have San Diego Gas and Electric. We have Excel across all 8 of their states. And just recently, just in the last month, closed from your great state, closed the Lower Colorado River Authority as a new customer. So we have users and use cases across transmission and distribution and generation and water management. And the entirety of it is focused, as you said, Andres, is a smart grid requires smart communications. And so you can't truly modernize the grid to address the 3 Ds that you mentioned, decarbonization, decentralization, and digitization without broadband. I mean, it's not rocket science. We know it in our everyday consumer lives. Most of the sectors of the economy know it. We're helping to drive it from a private, secure wireless broadband perspective to the utility sector. I am the chief legal and communications officer, but I wear a range of hats with the company. We've got a great team. And that's our goal. Our goal is to really enable an evolution of the grid from a secure communications platform perspective.
Yeah, Johnny.
Hey, Chris, let's talk about. It's good to know that you enjoyed that rendition of Baba McGee. I'm a Louisiana guy, so I kind of like that song myself. But let's talk about how, when you talk about communications, and traditionally we talked about a relationship between industry, government, and academia. And academia is a science, right?
Yep.
And I want you to answer the question in terms of urgency in broadband. Mm-hmm. And I want it to be answered in terms of the economy of the country and how goods move and how people think about what's important. So we know that Eisenhower created the expressways for us to really, it was military based, but it certainly enhanced our ability to move products and our supply chain, et cetera. We also know that we've had a quick switch, I might add, to the digital age. How products move digital, people order from home, the importance of broadband. So the first question is a simple one that I always like to ask. Is broadband now to the government just as important as the highway system? Or do we have a long way to go?
Yeah. So John, I spent almost 14 years at CTIA, the Wireless Trade Association, all the way up to the sort of EVP COO level. So you're not going to find a stronger ambassador for the benefits of broadband. It is the underpinning of everything we do, right? Every business runs on a digitized platform. Everything is based. I mean, I think if you told people, what are the two things you must have in your life? I think it's going to be, electricity and my broadband connection. For me, in case my wife and daughters watch this, I would say my wife and daughters electricity and broadband connection. But it is an absolute. And when you look at the reality that utilities are facing, when they're being asked to electrify everything in their footprint, they're being asked to be more resilient. They're asking for redundancy levels. They're asking for them to focus on decarbonization, to enable distributed energy, sometimes assets that they won't own or control. You're asking for them to be more cyber secure. And you're asking for them to do all of that at the same time that they have to be aware of customer bills. And that's an equation that is extraordinarily complex, but the underpinning of all of it is secure communications. It just is. Whether or not Anterix wins the commercial battles, utilities are going to need fiber and secure wireless broadband in their grids. It's the third grid. It is becoming as important to their future. When you think of all of the uses of data, it is becoming as integral as their transmission and distribution systems.
Yeah, I would chime in real quick to say that, when I was at Austin Energy from 2003 to 2010 and had the honor of coming up with the term and building the first smart grid in the world, that the only security that you really have is when you have a separate domain. So the notion of being able for a utility to build its own private wireless broadband network to manage its own grid, there is nothing more secure than that, because it's not sharing it with a public network or anybody else. And it's not even FirstNet, which is shared with a bunch of other utilities. It's running your own thing, which you're the only one that have access to it. So that, when it comes to security, the only way to guarantee true security is to have a separate domain, and that's what you get with Anterix.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with a extraordinarily senior member of one of those great, carrier organizations, and they are great. They are phenomenal for us as citizens and for the country and for the economy. But in the exchange with him, he said, we absolutely positively cannot offer what you can with a secure private network. It's a resiliency. It's a build to suit. Build to a utility's needs. It's backup power. Gosh, it even gets down to greater tensile strength on guy wires. It's where you place towers, and then Andres, to your point, it's prioritization. You're not relying on anyone else, and utilities know how to build communications networks. One of our first customers is going to ultimately sunset more than 24 wireless networks within their footprint. And they're all narrow band, they're all purpose built, they're all single use. A lot of them are reaching end of life, and they're gonna load those capabilities and those use cases onto broadband. So yeah, I'm all in on what you just said.
Yeah, and going back to the emphasis on economic and how businesses are created and supply chains, et cetera. There's a book, I think his name was Moon. He wrote a book, William Moon, entitled Blue Highways. And after the interstates were built about 20 or 30 years, he went to all of the highways and all of the communities that were left distraught because the interstate did not touch them.
Sure.
All of the enterprises then moved toward the interstate. But in academic discussions of broadband, the whole idea is, okay, you don't need the interstate to do that anymore. Broadband must be rural. It must be urban. It must be between long stretches of highway. So if that is the case, then perhaps the blue highways, or those things that were deserted,
Yeah.
can have a revitalization of
Yeah.
business enterprises. Because if we look at, and from my point of view, I always look at how, whether it's highways, whether it's electricity, whatever it is, how it affects where enterprises put their businesses, right? So do you think that we will have a revitalization of people moving back to the blue highways, back to the Luckenbach, Texas of the world,
Yeah.
revitalizing the interesting main streets in America that have been deserted? So therefore change the entire structure of American cities and how we think about that, because we don't need the highways theoretically for everything that we do. We do it through here now.
Yeah. And John, your point is extremely well taken, right? It started even before the highways, right? It started with the train system and where there were train stops, and cities grew up around those stops, and then you, like you said, you had the interstate highway system. The answer is yes. I mean, I think we saw it during the pandemic, right? We saw people fleeing from cities, and in this environment where you've got remote workforces, they are moving to areas that are lesser developed, and we are seeing broadband being extended. I mean, we've got tens and tens of billions of dollars right now at NTIA designed specifically to ensure that broadband covers the entirety of our geography, right? It's pushed out to those areas where the population density is a lot less, and it is designed specifically to ensure that no one's left behind. We've had different names for it. The one that's caught on the most is probably the digital divide, but the government has tried time and time again. One of the things I like about what we're doing is it gives communities another tool in their toolbox to get broadband. So if a utility deploys broadband to its footprint, I think we all know that footprint, it covers areas that don't have broadband right now. And the idea is if a utility can deploy, fiber and build towers and drag electricity and secure rights of way to a wireless broadband network, they can also, to the extent it makes sense, make that infrastructure available. They don't have to provide end user services. But if a community never had fiber and all of a sudden, a utility brings it for their own use case, for their own internal uses, but now you have the infrastructure there, I think that's a game changer. I think that's an incredible tool in the toolbox to try to cut through this digital divide.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think what's related to, I call it a lag. Every time, let me get on the technology side rather than the business side, there's always a lag in the adoption of new technologies. Just like even now, people like to get off grid and do those kind of things. But as we talk about that lag and how people really, really adopt to things, I want you to answer some questions related to how you communicate the new technologies in this relegated.
Yeah.
So
they're relegated to regulation. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have talked a lot on this program about technologies sitting on the shelf that could benefit the grid. We've talked a lot about the fact that the grid moves like a glacier in terms of compared to other enterprises, because there's no internal or external competition, I might add. We've talked about the fact that the United States has spent billions and billions of dollars to upgrade the grid from the edge and et cetera. But of course, nothing has been done significantly, quote unquote. Now, it's still the most dynamic engine in the world.
Yeah.
It is the biggest machine in the world. When you communicate with Washington, D.C., let's get back now to government, private enterprise. Yeah. How do you talk about the relationship between research for the grid, the research that's sitting on the shelf, already has been done?
Yeah. How
can it get on the grid? And of course, related to that is how will the utilities get paid?
Yeah. No, great suite of questions. I mean, to me, And the two of you are in my camp as well, right? We're all marketers to some extent, right? If you're in the R&D space, or you're in the education space, or the where we are in the broadband space, ultimately you're marketing something. You're marketing your thoughts, your ideas, your concepts, your products. When it came to the federal government, we found a way to really boil it down to a few key thoughts that became paramount in part of this IIJA, BIL, and then the IRA pieces of legislation, which is, again, simple. Modern grid requires modern communications. So you start with something as simple as that. And then anytime someone talks about data, you really have to highlight, well, how are you going to capture that data? How are you going to move that data? And how are you going to act upon that data? You really can't do that without broadband. And when we talk about modernizing the grid and pushing intelligence to the edge, and you think machine learning and artificial intelligence and cloud and edge computing and virtual and augmented reality, broadband, 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 right? It is the core underpinning of every one of those. When you talk about, Winter Storm Uri and how things may have been better, and again, it was a complex both storm and outcome, but situational awareness and operational intelligence can be better. And so how do you do that in real time? Broadband. And so for us, it's taking whether it's people in the government, or it's our utility customers, or it's our innovative supplier partners, it's taking them where they are. And so for each of our initial customers, they had a different primary use case. San Diego Gas and Electric, theirs was falling conductor. They wanted to deploy this capability. It's jointly patented by them and by Schweitzer Engineering Labs, but it de-energizes a broken line before it hits the ground. So you think of that from a game-changing perspective with regard to wildfires, and they needed to have a capability to deploy that. So they needed the low latency of private LTE and the ability to prioritize bits. Each of our other four have different primary use cases. And so you have to meet them where they are. What are their needs? Is their need an interrupter? Or do they need, an update to their SCADA? Or are they sunsetting a land mobile radio system? And so for us, you have to be creative, flexible, innovative. And you really got to take, whether it's policymakers or it's customers, you got to meet them where they are. The great thing about broadband, my CEO, Rob Schwartz, talks about it as a Swiss Army knife, and I keep stealing it because it is. It does support dozens upon dozens of use cases. It's the same thing that this does for us. And so that's, to your question, we find ways to meet the audience where they are, to talk about the benefits of broadband for the sector as a whole.
Yeah. Let's push it. Yeah, Andre, let me push a little bit further and talk about innovation and funding things. And speaking to some of my congressmen in Washington and senators in Washington, by the way, Andres, Texas will have the pin to all of the money coming out of Washington for the next number of years. And the whole idea was, what about a model that would allow business enterprise to participate in purchasing broadband? Yeah. That is, let's not just depend upon the things that we have depended on before for the utilities just to do it for us. Yeah. So let us say, can you envision a business model where business enterprise in America will come together in a partnership with government in terms of financial stuff, to make sure that all of the new technologies are put on the grid, to make sure that the future of America is as safe as it can be vis-a-vis the movement of products? Can you envision another model where it's just not the grid or the utility companies, but a partnership between private enterprise to secure the broadband throughout the country? Yeah.
So you sweetened me up with Bobby McGee, hit me with a few gut punches, and now you're coming for the head. Like, that's a complex question. Right, Andreas? What happened here? We call it chaos. Start ducking and weaving.
Hey, he's a Longhorn. He's a Tiger. He's a Northwestern guy.
I made the mistake to the audience of telling John and Andres that I come from a family of 6 and bring it on. But I don't think I meant it that way. But All right, so let me hit at least a part of your question, right? I have a respect and an understanding of the sector now that I didn't have, right? I did come from the wireless side, and we did move technologies through at lightning pace. When you walk in a room, when all of us walk in a room and we hit the light switch, we don't think about the lights going on, right? We never think about the lights going on. They just go on. There are no synapses firing saying, did the lights go on? Did the lights not go on? So we're dealing with a sector who, by nature, they have to be cautious, and they have to be, they have to investigate, and they have to be confident and sure. From our product's perspective, what we've done is we've tried to help enable that broader investigation so that each individual utility doesn't have to redo it. So we have 15 experimental licenses, and one of them is from the great state of Texas, and it's Andres and the team at Texas State. But we have a bunch of others with utilities and with a couple vendors investigating. We have one with the NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, that looked at the integration of distributed energy. And so from our perspective, we don't want to disrupt the sector to the degree that you're talking about. We want to enable the sector to take advantage of those capabilities that are on the shelf. We launched our ecosystem with 37 companies about a year and a half ago. We're north of 100 now. So we have the leading innovators, and you think the Motorola, Nokia, Ericsson, Qualcomms, and then on the other side, it's the Schweitzers and the Hitachis and the Itrons and the Burns and Mac and Black and Veatch. And so what we're trying to do is enable the utilities to stand up a platform upon which they can deploy all of these things you're talking about, whether it's line vision and dynamic line rating, or the next version of AMI 2.0 with the Itrons and other leaders in that space. So that's sort of how we look at it. Our goal is, and spectrum is hard, right? Like you said, it's hard to acquire spectrum. Our team, which built Nextel, they had the foresight to acquire narrowband spectrum, and we had the wherewithal to convert it to broadband. For us, we're focused on the sector because we want to, not because our the underpinning report and order from the FCC says we have to.
Yeah, well, I think what I was getting to was the speed of change. So I think if you look at, you go to a board meeting with the X product, and the president says, we have so much demand now. We have to up our production. We got to make sure that the supply chain is faster. So with people talking about, when people talking about electric vehicles plugging in, people talking about billions and billions of the Internet of Things plugging in, people talking about moving to distributed workplaces where perhaps electricity is not as strong. People saying, well, therefore the load needs to go from the enterprises to the homes. I guess my question is, can we do it with the speed? If
we have to. Yeah, we have.
My question right now is, can we, if we have a model on the board, and this is not a candy, it's not cornflakes, it's the movement of protons, the spark, right? And we ask a question. Gosh, we're really, really pushing electric vehicles. We're really, really pushing distributive workplace. We're really, really pushing electric airplanes. So the question becomes a simple one, as I like to say on the program. When people move to America or different states, they don't bring their own electricity with them. So I'm talking about the speed of response to the customer base and the technologies that's evolving now that will hook into the grid. So I guess when you plug in the F-150, I mean, it's like 2 or 3 houses all of a sudden. So I don't think it's so much, Chris.
Well, and think of when we move it to the mid-size and then the large industrial vehicles, right, and the fleet.
So it's not so much the tech; it's being able to commit to meet the Microsoft demand.
Yeah.
to meet the demand of the, I don't know, Mustang Ford,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is. So
Yeah.
how do you think about the relationship, the math model? You go to a board, you would say, look, this is what's happening in America.
Yep.
Here are the number of vehicles. Here's the number of protons we're going to need.
Yeah.
And this is where we are in the next 5 years. How do you think about that?
Yeah. So there was a great, as I said, I just left Austin. I was at the EEI annual event, and it was a great event, and it was bracketed. They had such a stellar lineup, but it was bracketed on one end by the founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, and it was bracketed. Sorry, I was having a brain hiccup for a minute. Bracketed on the other end by Elon Musk, and to hear the two of them, their thoughts and they're thinking about the grid, they're thinking about electricity, they're thinking about the future sort of needs. And you've got, Bill Gates funding, more than 100 companies, all in different areas of the provision of electricity. And you've got, Elon Musk disrupting everything that he touches, right, in a very, very interesting way. The message from both of them is we have to move faster, right? The reality of the commitments to decarbonization are going to force a faster move. The money from the infrastructure funds and from the tax credits are going to push solar out quicker and quicker. I just came from the offices of United Power here in Brighton, a co-op who is living the reality, John, that you're talking about. They don't have a large square footage presence, but they have a very large sort of power need. 11% of their customers have already deployed solar, and they have an almost equal amount of electric vehicles in their footprint. And so a new reality is coming: two-way power, the ability, what do we call them, prosumers, the ability of folks to supply power back to the grid, aggregating them up to virtual power plants. What happens with FERC 2222? Is there a future with transactive energy? I mean, there in 10 years from now, I don't think this grid will look anything like what it looks like right now. And I think that's an absolute necessity. And that was the topic of the CEOs also talking at EEI.
I'm a little disappointed that Andreas went out there to bring. I mean, you had two great merchants, but you didn't have Andreas Cavallo there.
Yeah.
To take the mergers down the brain. So what you're saying is this: look, we have to respond, okay?
Yes.
And we have to get faster.
Yes.
But the mechanisms for getting faster, nobody knows what they would be. Nobody knows.
The mechanism to me is reality, right? It's the absolute reality that we are facing a weather and an environmental future that isn't sustainable. When we talk about generational storms, it turns out that they're happening multiple times every generation. They're not generational storms anymore. When we talk about wildfires across the entirety of the West, creeping into Texas and into the central United States, and we talk about hurricanes of greater frequency and force than we used to have, and more tornadoes. I have an absolute belief that the leadership of the utility sector, from the individual utilities all the way up through the leadership of EEI, knows and is focused on this transformation.
Yeah. See, that's what makes it so interesting. I was a major consultant for 22 years of a major insurance company in America, the best areas, and we would just pull out. We would say, okay, we're not going to insure any more houses in Northern California. We're not going to insure anything on the coast, but the broadband can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to stick with whatever the weather brings.
Yeah.
We have to think about burying stuff again, even though it's more difficult to get to once there's a problem. So the interesting thing about what you do, the relationship between government and industry, are questions that most businesses don't really face, because at the end of the day, if the weather is getting bad in New Mexico, we just won't sell any policies there.
Yeah.
But no matter what the weather does in your business, you have to convince government that you've got to be there.
Yeah, and ours at the moment is less about convincing government and more about working with the utilities to deploy. At times, depending upon whether they're a co-op, a muni, a public power, or an investor-owned, They have work to do to convince regulators, but I have yet to come across a regulator who has listened to what we've talked about and not agreed with it. And so, the underpinning of where we need to go from an electricity perspective, from a grid perspective, is secure, robust communications.
Okay, should I buy an electric car tomorrow? Yes or no?
Yeah, and if you don't buy it tomorrow, definitely your next purchase should be. Certainly. I mean, I think the reality is the charging infrastructure is going there. We're on, the Teslas are on, version 7 now or so. And I think that's the future from an environmental perspective. I think it's a future from the performance perspective. I think we're seeing the Lightning. I think the Lightning will be a game changer for America. And we just saw what both Ford and GM agree to aggregate their chargers and use the Tesla charging system. So we're going to see scale there as well.
And standardization. You see a lot of standardization.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me share real quick my screen and see how we're doing in Texas. I want to show you guys how's the grid doing in Texas. So you can see here, this is the supply and the demand, and so usually peak is around 75. The forecast for today is about 79. The temperature, it gets higher. So we have a capacity, current, operating reserve capacity of about 7 gigawatts. So we got plenty of room for mistakes. And so I think that the grid is looking good, John. And then when it comes to solar and wind, how the solar and wind are performing, you can see that the solar is kicking in now, in the morning and noontime, 1 o'clock, what have you, and the wind was kind of started a little late, then picked up. So the grid in Texas is looking good, not bad.
Good.
And then the other thing I wanted to share with you guys real quick is the Digital 360 Summit is coming up, and it's going to be September 26th through the 29th, and we're very excited about it. And it's going to be at Texas State University, our major hosting sponsor. And these were the companies that sponsor and keynoted last year. Morgan O'Brien got inducted into the Digital 360 Summit Hall of Fame last year. And hopefully he'll join us with the other inductees to induct the next person. Sure. And we have all kinds of things coming up. And obviously Cedar that Chris mentioned is the 14 labs that we're building around utilities, buildings, energy, water, cities, mobility, network sensors, and data and software. And we thank, again, Texas State for sponsoring the Digital Roundtable. So Chris, real quick, when you look at, Ameren, you're talking to everybody, in the United States. Your spectrum is for North America, right? Does it cover Mexico and Canada or just US?
Just the United States. Yep.
Just US.
And the territories, but yeah.
Right. So
and Texas.
So you got Ameren, which has operations in Missouri and Illinois, I believe.
Yep.
And you got Excel Energy, which has operations in Minnesota and Colorado and Texas. They do transmission.
And New Mexico and North Dakota and South Dakota and
there you go.
One. Yeah.
And then you got San Diego Gas and Electric, which is part of the Sempra group. And I don't know what they bought, if it was just a service territory of SCDG&E or the entire service territory, because SoCal Gas is bigger. So, but you got Southern California, let's say, and you got Evergy, which is Kansas, KCP&L and Westar merging in Kansas. So you got a good thing going, and then you got LCRA in Texas now, and so you need a few more things on the East Coast, but when you think about the EEI conference and you go to all this, the NARUC and APPA and NRACA and all these things, where do you think, again, John brought it up earlier, it's an industry that moves slowly, primarily, don't want to pick with my brethren because, I'm a dog too, I'm a dumb old utility guy. It's just the nature of infrastructure. You got to deploy it and depreciate it over the life of the infrastructure. some of these assets can be depreciated over 30 or 40 years. So you can't just rip and replace, because you got to run the life of the depreciation business model to make the asset worthwhile, because you're spreading that over the use of the lifetime and all the customers. So where do you see the dialogue happening in terms of priorities? They're saying, utilities seem to have a huge priority issue around, turnover, retirements, the resignation generation, losing their workforce. That seems to be the number one issue everywhere. And then depending on where you are, there's a bunch of other issues. Where would you say in the list of the many things that a utility needs to do, keep the lights on 24/7, 365, where is that conversation about turning to the new broadband thing? Is that the top of the issues, or is it in the middle of the issues, or is it in the bottom of the issues? Kind of high level, what's your thought?
Yeah, certainly not in the bottom at all. If you go back 3 years before we started offering our product, you wouldn't have heard anything about private LTE, Andres, with you guys in Digital 360, right? You certainly wouldn't have heard about it at EEI or Distributech or UTC or anything. We created the Utility Broadband Alliance with a couple folks, Southern and a few others, specifically to begin the conversation. It's now happening at every trade event. There are discussions about secure broadband, secure private broadband. And I think we all know this. It's fiber where you can put fiber, and then it's robust, LTE pivoting to 5G broadband where you can do that. What we're seeing, for better or for worse, is communications is coming up out of the traditional communications team at a utility and becoming a strategic discussion at the absolute top of the C-suite. So we gathered a group of leaders. We call it our Utility Strategic Advisory Board. It has 8 CIOs on it, and what they do is they are our sort of eyes and ears and our prioritization team when it comes to the utilities needs with regard to broadband. So they're the ones that are identifying, what they need from those 100+ companies that we have in our ecosystem. So, but at the same time, we're having discussions with CFOs and at EEI's financial conference. We're getting placed and asked to sit down in front of CEOs, or we're being pulled into a holding company to educate a range of operating company leaders who are CIO, CTO, transmission, distribution. I mean, it is almost mind-boggling how rapidly the conversation has picked up and how broad and deep it is within organizations. And it's become a strategic imperative.
So of those relationships, Chris, it strikes me, and again, I happen to have the honor of having built the first smart grid in the world. At the time, perhaps with too much duct tape, bubble gum, and rubber bands and Band-Aids, because a lot of this stuff was not meant to talk, and we forced it to talk together. But of all the partners that you have, there are several that I'm interested in learning where things are. But there's one that is, in my opinion, the most important partner as it relates to the grid, which is Schweitzer Engineering Labs. Tell us a little bit about that relationship and some of the things that you have publicly said that you have tested or working out or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, Schweitzer excites me probably for the same reason, Andres, that it excites you, right? They're a very well-known quality within the sector. It's a whole bunch of engineers who focus on engineering solutions, right? So we were talking to SDG&E and Schweitzer about falling conductor, that capability that I mentioned before. And then, our technology folks sat down with their engineers and we got put into their lab. And, the way engineers do it is every single permutation of the situation of the network was tested, right? Heavy load, light load, near the tower, far from the tower. Your grandmother's using, TikTok. Your kids are watching videos. and it was designed to say, this is sort of a life-saving technology. We're gonna test this thing from the beginning to the end. And then they put out a white paper with us, right? And so that to me was a validation of, if you're talking about a critical use case within your grid, wildfire mitigation, the ability to stop a fire. There are a lot of capabilities out there that can identify when a fire has happened. You know, different high definition cameras or you know, measurement of dew point or things like that. This stops it from happening, right? Yeah, smoke detection. This stops it before it happens.
Yeah.
I look at the work we did with them and the NREL work, which was, it was about the threshold capability or ability of broadband to support the extensive integration of distributed energy resources. And NREL did 2 different studies with us. And so, you know, we're looking at what are those next studies, what are those next white papers that will be helpful across the sector. But at the same time as we're doing that, we're going to see Ameren, Evergy, and at least SDG&E turn on their networks this year. So we're going to have operational networks. We have all 3 of them are working to deploy towers. I know Ameren and Evergy have towers deployed, and so we're going to have real life operational capabilities and use cases being demonstrated. But for us, I'm with you. I was excited as heck that we got into the Schweitzer Labs and we talked with them. We've managed to do a couple different panels with their head of R&D, Ryan Bradich, and you know, he's just a brilliant and you know, intelligent, wonderful guy. And doing panels, having our team do panels with him and with them about the value that this use case brings, and having that, you know, side by side with the emblem of a company like SEL is fantastic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Johnny.
Yeah, let's move the analysis away from the technology to the human resources discussions that's going on.
Yeah.
For the first time in the history of the electric units here in America, and I like to say my father was an ag agent. He was doing rural electricity north of New Orleans in the 30s and 40s and 50s. But for the first time, it's very interactive. It's interactive with machine learning, what we call AI. For the first time, they see broadband as interacting with things that will really take away jobs from the units. So we were to sit down and do a white paper and ask one question. Once everything is said and done in the, from an analogy point of view, a model point of view, will AI interaction with the grid create jobs, or will it take jobs away? And what has been the response to this reality? Because as you said, and I like to say, I just want my lights to come on. But now with the interactive technology of the grid, that it is interacting with other great trends in American society. And the biggest one is machine learning. Like you said, we'll be able to predict what will happen before the fire comes. We'll be able to understand where the loads need to be. We can do that now, of course, to a certain extent. But as communication director, and I am the head union guy for all of the grid employees in America, right? So obviously I don't live in Texas. Let's just say I live in New York.
Yep.
So what do you tell me when I come to New York? What do you tell me?
I'll give you 2 examples, right? The first is my older daughter. Just graduated from Vassar last year. She got a degree in cognitive science. I didn't know what cognitive science was when she began at Vassar. I don't think she did. It's sort of the intersection of sociology, psychology, and artificial intelligence, right?
I know it well, and statistics.
And right, exactly. And so it's basically, how does the human brain, and by the way, it doesn't even have to be a human brain, but how does a brain respond to to signals, right, to inputs? So I think of us reorienting some of what we're doing, but then I also think of, and you guys are my age, right? You know about this. What happened when we went from 2 to 3G with these devices, right? When we were at 2G, we didn't have a we didn't have a touchscreen phone, and we didn't have broadband. When we went to 3G, we got broadband, and Apple was smart enough to really push through a touchscreen phone, and it created an ecosystem of innovators, and it created new jobs that we never could have contemplated. So to me, when you think about the evolution of technology, whether it's AI enabled or just simply broadband enabled, I think what
automobile or whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is, right? Like, so did those people that made buggies, could they no longer make buggies? Yes, they could no longer make buggies, but they could join the creation of automobiles, right? I see a future where technology just enables new jobs. I mean, it just evolves so there are going to need to be people to manage these new broadband capabilities that are going, and develop them and research them, and then make them, right? And there is a really significant push at this moment to bring manufacturing back into the United States. So I'm not worried from a job perspective what will happen when broadband is even more ubiquitous. I'm excited as heck about that job future, because I think it'll enable opportunities that are well paying and don't exist right now.
I'm reminded by the IRS. I kind of pay attention to the job descriptions that the IRS allows for their tax returns. And there was a significant number of new job descriptions that were added over the years, the last 2 or 3 years. The number one hottest, most used new job description is a crypto miner. I'm a crypto miner,
I still don't understand that one. So yeah.
There's all kinds of things coming out that is like, what?
Analytics is nothing but statistics from sociology and psychology. It's been around forever.
100%. The next iteration, right?
You have to change what you major in. So if you have as I always say, if you have a degree in psychology, economics, or sociology, you are a statistician by definition.
Sure.
Right. You can't, and then of course you take those same skills, and because what we call machine learning, and then you got to have theorists about the data, or else it's just data in and garbage out when you utilize it for business enterprises. So I think that's true from an intellectual point of view. I think from the nightly news and et cetera, that it's a talking point for them to talk about how many jobs will be taken away, therefore stirring up the population for different kinds of comments. But I think you're exactly right, because new technologies have always created new jobs.
Right.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So I would want to go on the record by telling you all, now that I'm this is just me talking, the human being, that I'm a shareholder of Anterix, and publicly traded, and
so am
I can't wait for the stock to hit $1,000. I mean, it's just sitting there. Nobody has discovered it. It's kind of amazing to me. Now is the time to buy it. There's never been a time to buy it because it's trading at 35 or something.
Andres, when my general counsel listens to this, I hope she absolutely recalls that everything that was just said was said by you.
It was.
I didn't say a single thing.
No, and the thing about it, I'm a Tesla owner, and I bought my last house with gains from the Tesla stock, which now is predicted to hit $5,000 in the next 4 years. But the thing about it is, when I was at Austin Energy, I wrote a letter. I convinced all my peers across the nation, wrote a letter in 2008 to the Obama administration, demanding, requesting, begging for allocation of spectrum for utilities so we could build a broadband smart grid, which I had just built by myself with unlicensed spectrum and fiber and point-to-point Ethernet and duct tape and rubber band and all those things. And we were denied. We were told, go talk to the FCC. FCC sells spectrum. We don't give spectrum away to anybody. Screw you. So that was a disappointment moment. But the reason I bring that up is, when I was, again, in the journey of doing what I was doing back then, I was looking for a, smart grid in a box, and I remember the first thing that I did, because I came from telecom. I used to make cell phones for Philips. Made the first CDMA phones, if you all know what that is. I call AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, all kinds of companies and said, "Can you guys come over here and help me, put a network on top of Austin Energy so I can have broadband?" And they all refused, and they had all these stupid conditions at the time. Now they have come a long ways from those days. But you guys now have what if I was a CIO at any utility right now, I would be like, signing on the dotted line and running as fast as I can to build it. And it's amazing to me that it's not happening at the speed that it should. But anyway, I digress. Chris, tell us, you're in Denver, home is in Philly or New Jersey, wherever it is.
Yeah. Yep.
What's in front of you the next 6 months? What keeps you up at night? Where are you heading for the next 6 months? What's in front of you?
Yeah. So one thing we have shared with the marketplace is we have a new way of sort of measuring movement within the sector, right? And we actually call it demonstrated intent. So, not rocket science. It's that an entity has demonstrated its intent to move forward. We announced that we have 14 entities that have demonstrated an intent to move forward. So for us, it's continuing to educate the sector, working with those 14 companies to help move them to contract and help them, as they ultimately move to deploy, working with the other utilities in our pipeline and continuing to sort of shape our active ecosystem sort of group. We've identified and created a cybersecurity and physical security collective within that ecosystem. So we now have 7 entities, 7 companies that are cybersecurity focused. We will probably identify a few other areas that we will call collectives, and we'll bring sort of symbiotic technologies together there to have an integrated solution for utilities. And a lot of that focus is coming from that utility strategic advisory board that I mentioned earlier. So, for us, we're about 90 employees. We have 2 co-headquarters, one in Central Jersey, New Jersey, one in Northern Virginia. But we have employees spread throughout the country, 90 and growing in terms of employees.
Chris, tell me real quick, where do you see the dialogue of the evolution? I remember telling, LCRA, we worked with LCRA, for a while, and then they made the decision to make the acquisition of the spectrum. And we continue to work with them. Of course, they're our neighbor. We're in their service territory. Where do you see the conversation a la FERC 2222 for aggregators in the grid? Where do you see the conversation of an LCRA or anybody else taking that critical infrastructure broadband capability that you enable and lighting things up beyond what they use, let's say water utilities or services for smart cities or any of that? Where is that dialogue happening, or how do you see perhaps the rural guys banding together and creating a GNT for the broadband and buying spectrum? Is that happening? Is that light bulb going off anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that light bulb is somewhere between flickering and on brightly. LCRA has identified its desire to serve other sort of like-minded organizations within its footprint, right? They already do that now. So transit and other use cases like that. So I expect them to continue to do that with broadband. We certainly see the co-op community wanting to utilize a network like this for their internal use cases, but also provide broadband externally. We, as I said earlier, we worked really hard with Congress on a range of provisions that ended up in the IIJA. We worked with, the reason I'm in Brighton is the Gridwise Alliance board meeting. And they've been fantastic sort of partners for the industry to help move some of this innovation into and through Congress. EEI has been tremendous. UBBA has been tremendous. But I'll give you an idea of our thinking. We wrote the middle mile provision. So Anterix wrote the middle mile provision that is in the IIJA. we did it. It doesn't necessarily benefit Anterix. The goal was, you know, to enable those opportunities whereby a utility could get government funding if they desired to help support bringing middle mile capabilities into areas that don't have it. You know, fiber and private wireless infrastructure.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Johnny, final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say that I want to buy the company. I'm not interested in stocks themselves. I want to buy the whole damn company. So let me know if when you're going to sell it. Now, the other thing
we got shareholders, so that's, you know, and a wonderful board too.
Make an offer, Johnny. Make an offer.
$50. But here's my question: do you think, Chris and Andreas, that there will be over 130 makers in America of electric cars? It has only three moving. It only has three moving parts to it.
Yeah.
And we were talking about creating new jobs. You know, it's like when my golfing friends say, I need some golf clubs. I said, well, they don't have any moving parts to them.
Yeah.
Well, the electric vehicle it's so simplistic now.
Crazy.
And what I see a movement back to manufacturing automobiles in America based on electric cars. Maybe the styles coming back. Maybe we'll see some fishtails again.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'd love that. Yeah.
Some cars with styles rather than all of them looking alike. So have you guys thought about that reality in terms of how you think about the economy in the future and the people you have to serve and those kind of things?
Yeah, I'll just say the advent and the evolution of the electric vehicle has been mind-blowing, right? And, you know, when we talk about jobs, you know, Elon Musk moved his gigaplant to nearby you guys in Austin. The darn thing's a mile long by a half mile wide, and they're going to expand it already, right? So we're seeing innovation and evolution happen at light speed. Yes, AI is out there. There are reasons to be concerned about it, but there are reasons to be excited about it. And so
here's the biggest innovation. And when you do it, I just want 60%. In the great state of Louisiana, cars go in the water. Electric cars can't make it. So we need to be able to convert those to boats all of a sudden. And I think that's doable. So this is great. I think you're in the middle of the new economy. I think about everything in terms of business models and economies. I love the technology, but I always ask Andreas, okay, how are you going to make some money off of this technology and create some jobs? So I think that's great. And thank you very much.
Thank you. We're well positioned. Good revenue opportunities. We've brought in about 240 million in revenue over the last couple of years. Zero debt, you know. So I think we're well positioned as a company, and then presenting ourselves as a partner to the utility sector to help them evolve.
Thank you, Chris, for being with us today. I look forward to the journey of keeping track, and you're welcome to join us again at Digital 360 Summit.
Yes, we'll see
coming
you in
up,
September.
Look forward to the football season, and maybe my Cowboys will get lucky this year.
I'm not. I don't think that's going to happen. But Andres, we'll make a little side bet on those two games.
Okay. Let's do that.
Yeah. All right.
Go Saints.
Johnny, take us away.
Go Saints.
Well, I know it's kind of late. I hope I didn't wake you, but what I've got to say can't wait. I know you'd understand. Every time I try to tell you, the words just come out wrong. So I'll have to say I love you in a song. Hey, I know it's kind of strange, but every time I'm near you, I just run out of things to say. I know you'd understand. Every time I try to tell you, the words just came out wrong. So I'll have to say I love you in a song.
Woo.
Well done, Johnny.
Loved it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.